We're skipping a bit, and we're skipping to Siman Ain, to 70. And the reason is, as you'll see soon, it has some kind of connection to Purim. You ask, how is Kriyat Shema connected to Purim, right? There's no, yeah. But let me say, it's connected to this Purim, this year. That's even a harder question. So we have to go by Siman Ain, and we'll see the end of Siman Ain, the end of 70, and then we'll see the connection of it to Purim. You already start to get an insight of Purim and Purim Suda this year. So that's the connection to Purim. The topic of Siman Ain is who is obligated in Kriyat Shema or who is exempt from Kriyat Shema. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Nashim va'avadim, women exempt from Kriyat Shema, they're patur from Kriyat Shema. And the reason is, it's a mitzvah which depends on time. It's a time-bound mitzvah taseh. It depends on time. Why does it depend on time? We have a mitzvah to read Shema, recite Shema, once in the morning and once in the evening. As we learned a few times, when you wake up and go to sleep. So it depends on time. And we have a rule that women are exempt from time-bound mitzvah. But, continues the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't have it on all of the other time-bound mitzvot. Here it says, although women are exempt from Kriyat Shema, it's a good idea to teach them to say Kriyat Shema. It's a good habit to say Kriyat Shema, because it's not just a regular mitzvah, it's a mitzvah of us accepting the kingdom of Hashem, right? We say, Shema Yisrael, listen to the nation of Israel. Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. So we're accepting the kingdom of Hashem on us. Therefore, although it's a time-bound mitzvah, so women should say Kriyat Shema. And the Rama says at least the first pasuk. At least the first pasuk takes 10 seconds. So between doing the things before work, even if a woman doesn't go to a minyan, at least the first pasuk they should say. Okay, so that's what says the Shulchan Aruch. We have an interesting thing.
Both in the morning and evening.
Both in the morning and evening, at least once a day, but both morning and evening, it's a good idea to say Kriyat Shema. In the evening, they could say Kriyat Shema before they go to sleep. So that counts for the evening. So at least in the morning when they wake up, so women should say Kriyat Shema. Okay, so now we have here another topic, and that's a question in the poskim. And I think that we can look around, ask our wives, and see what's the common custom, not like the first opinion that the Mishnah Berurah brings. There's a question about the blessings of Kriyat Shema. So that's an interesting question, because usually the blessings are rabbinical, right? We take a lulav. What's the mitzvah midoraita? What's the mitzvah from the Torah?
On the first day
Taking
of
the
Sukkot.
lulav. What's the rabbinical mitzvah? Saying the blessing. So usually we have that the mitzvah itself is the doing, the acting, or saying, or whatever, and the blessing beforehand is rabbinical, midirabanan. It's rabbinical. But what about remembering going out of Egypt? Is this a mitzvah midoraita? Yeah. It's a mitzvah midoraita. Is it a time-bound mitzvah? Good question if it's a time-bound mitzvah or not. Maybe we should remember going out of Egypt all the time, every day. So we say it once a day to remember going out of Egypt, but really it's not necessarily a time-bound mitzvah. So we have here a question. Do women need to say the blessing of Shema? What blessing are we talking about? The blessing after Shema. The blessing after Shema, which talks about going out of Egypt. So even if we don't say Vayomer, which the third paragraph of Shema, which talks about going out of Egypt, we have in the blessing, going out of Egypt. So we have here a very unique blessing, the blessing after Kriyat Shema, that talks about going out of Egypt. So obviously our sages, they wrote a text, they said how to when do you say the blessing? But the original mitzvah, or in it, is a mitzvah to remember going out of Egypt, and that also women should do. Therefore, some poskim say, maybe I want to read through the language. Okay. Some poskim say that the woman should say also the blessings of Kriyat Shema. So it's a question, argument, but obviously if a woman has time, a woman should say the Kriyat Shema and the blessings of Kriyat Shema. Even for Ashkenaziyot, there's no problem. There's a question about blessings. Ashkenazi woman can say the blessings of Kriyat Shema, and that's a good thing to do. So that's we've covered the first topic about Kriyat Shema for women. And the topic is, the answer is, maybe it's not an obligation, but it's a good thing to do. That's first topic. What about children? And here we have a very maybe practical question. If a man is obligated in Kriyat Shema, so what is he also obligated to do compared towards his children? To teach them. Is a woman obligated to teach her children to say Kriyat Shema? Well, it's a good practice, but a woman herself isn't obligated in Kriyat Shema, so who says she has the obligation to teach the kids to say Kriyat Shema? So it's true that if you look at practice life, practical speaking, most of the teachings of children in the young age comes from the mother. That's the normal, maybe. We can also open from there. I forgot to open. 1 second. Okay.
We could have opened there.
Maybe I forgot to open the side, one of the sides doors. There we go. Yeah. Anyway, so here we have the key, but that's good to go. And to open for him, so we have that's the key. Okay. So v'shinantam levanecha. So it's an obligation of the father to teach his children. So it's true that usually, many times, the woman will teach the children. We have a question more of an obligation. Who is obligated in doing that? And we're going to the times of the Mishnah, the Gemara, maybe even 100 years ago. When did people wake up? When did people go to sleep? When did children wake up? When did children go to sleep? So typically a father woke up very early before his children woke up. And he came back many times after his children went to sleep, especially when they were relatively young. So it could be that the father saw his children once a week on Shabbat. That was a day of him being with his family, depending on the families and the culture then. But that could be very, very normal. So the Shulchan Aruch says children are exempt from Kriyat Shema. Children do not need to read Kriyat Shema. I'm not sure if he knows to open. If you're going to, you want to open? It will open? Also on the left?
Not on the left, no.
Okay. So if you want to, that's the key. So he came in. So children, says the Shulchan Aruch, are exempt from Kriyat Shema. The question is, what age are they exempt from Kriyat Shema? We have here an argument between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Rashi is the grandfather of Rabbeinu Tam. So that's the interesting families there. Many arguments between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. According to Rabbeinu Tam, children are exempt only before the age of chinuch. And we'll discuss in a moment what's the age of chinuch. So children are exempt from Kriyat Shema only before the age of chinuch. And what's this big teaching here? One might have thought that since the Kriyat Shema is so important, so even if a child is 1 year old before he reached the age of chinuch, even then when trying and save from Kriyat Shema, teaches Rabbeinu Tam, children are exempt from Kriyat Shema before the age of chinuch. The age of chinuch is around 6 or 7. More or less when they can talk already, they understand about Hashem. That's more or less the age of chinuch for Kriyat Shema. So around the age of 6 or 7. Rashi says that even after the age of chinuch, a father is exempt. He doesn't need to teach his son Kriyat Shema. And the reason is because he's not with him. When comes the time of Kriyat Shema, so the father is in the field and the Kriyat Shema in the morning. And when comes the time of Kriyat Shema of the evening, so the son might be already asleep in bed, or the father might still be on the way back from the field. So there's no electricity then, right? Things were different. Therefore, says Rashi, that children are exempt from Kriyat Shema. But the Shulchan Aruch concludes, he brings both opinions and he says, it's better to go follow Rabbeinu Tam, which means from the age of 6 or 7 to educate the kids to say Kriyat Shema. So today it's obvious. We have schools. and maybe perhaps also mothers have a much more important role today in educating than in the past. They're more involved with it. But you can see how important it is to educate the children for Kriyat Shema. The Shulchan Aruch here brings another halacha which we don't follow today. Interesting why. Someone who got married, a chatan. Does he say Kriyat Shema on the wedding or 2 days after the wedding? The answer, the Gemara, it depends. Yes, no, depending exactly the case. But many times the answer will be no. Many times in weddings, especially if it's a wedding before the Shkia, during the summer, you'll have a wedding, they'll go to the Cheder Yichud, and when they go out of the Cheder Yichud, before they eat, there'll be Mariv, and the Chatan will join everyone with saying Kriyat Shema. Although he's exempt, he doesn't need it. So how come he's joining everyone to say Kriyat Shema? So first we have a hint from it, from Rabban Gamliel in the Mishnah. So we have a hint from it, but one of the reasons is, why is a Chatan exempt from Kriyat Shema? So he's doing a mitzvah, he's getting married now, it's a mitzvah to get married. Not only is doing a mitzvah, he's very disturbed about the mitzvah. His thoughts aren't so much in Kriyat Shema and davening. He's like, we can consider it osek b'mitzvah. He's busy in a mitzvah now, and being busy in a mitzvah prevents him from saying Kriyat Shema. Someone who is busy in a mitzvah, and that mitzvah prevents him from doing the other mitzvah, is exempt from the second one. Okay, so for example, we will have an example which we want to go into it, but someone who's digging a grave, that's the examples that they have, always going to, because digging a grave, especially in those days, today you take a tractor, it doesn't take so long. Those days, if someone has to dig, it takes time to dig. And if now people will be waiting for too long, and then 1 second we have to say Kriyat Shema, and now daven, everything might go late, and then it's dark. So what do you do when it's dark outside? So doing one mitzvah might prevent doing the other mitzvah. So he's exempt from the second one. So the chatan, the groom who's getting married, he's now doing a mitzvah of getting married, and he's bothered by getting married, so he can't read Kriyat Shema with all of his mind and all of his intention. He just can't do it, and therefore he's exempt from Kriyat Shema. So I have a question to you guys. How come today it's very, very common, especially in the summer, they have the chuppah, they have the wedding, they'll go to the Cheder Yichud, have a small bite, go out, and what will they do? Daven and say Kriyat Shema. How could that be?
Just because it's exempt doesn't mean you can't do it.
So you're saying if he's not exempt, he can't do it, right? That's a question, but we can see Rabban Gamliel who said, I don't care, I'm reading Kriyat Shema, said Rabban Gamliel, right? I'm reading Kriyat Shema. What else? We have an idea, which we say a few times in davening. Today, how much are we concentrated in davening? When we sit down in shul, we'll be sitting down in shul in 15 minutes more or less, and we'll say Kriyat Shema. Is our mind 100% on the words of Kriyat Shema? We prefer not to answer, right? So we'll leave that question with a non-answer question, not answered, right? Our mind isn't 100% on Kriyat Shema. So now getting married, is that really today in our days? And we still say, okay, that's the most we can put our minds, and we flow and think about, we have ADHD, all of us, and we think about 100 things. So we stop for Kriyat Shema, and we try to put our mind as much as possible in Kriyat Shema, although we know that could be a very chance. We will think, say Shema Yisrael, and after Shema Yisrael, we'll say Ve'ahavta, and then we'll start thinking about the dog or the car or the work or anything. So that's the natural thing, right? That's what happens. Therefore, also the Chatan isn't so much bothered by the wedding that it will prevent him from saying Kriyat Shema. He'll say it almost the same. Some Chatanim will say the wedding uplifts them, and they'll say Kriyat Shema even better than the rest of the days. But today, in our days, when we as is, unfortunately, we don't have a focused mind on Kriyat Shema, so we don't see any conflict between the two mitzvot. He can get married, and he can say Kriyat Shema, and there's no contradiction between them. So that's, if you hear the Mishnah, learn the Mishnah in Sukkah, that Chatan is exempt from Kriyat Shema, then you go to a wedding and say, hey, how are you saying Kriyat Shema? So that's one of the explanations of how we're saying Kriyat Shema. we mentioned the halacha of Chatan of osek b'mitzvah, patur me'amitzvah. The reason a groom is exempt from Kriyat Shema because he is now doing a mitzvah. And here we have a very interesting halacha. Not only someone who is actually now doing a mitzvah, he's now, I don't know, shaking a lulav or returning a lost item to a friend. Not only he is considered a mitzvah, even someone who is, the language in Hebrew, osek betzorchei rabim. He's now doing something to help the community. He's to help the people around him. So that's part of a mitzvah, maybe gimilut chasadim, thinking about others, someone who's busy now in doing other people. So, and he's busy, and he can't stop now because he's busy helping them. He doesn't need to stop in order to read Kriyat Shema. That's a bit of flipping in the mind of someone who's now, we say in Shabbat, we have the Misha Berach. Everyone who with faith deals with the issues which are related to the community, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem will repay them their reward. That's people who are part of the community. That's part of a mitzvah. So if he can stop and nothing will happen, so he should stop and say Kriyat Shema. If he can't stop, so he doesn't stop. The Mishnah Berurah here brings the question: what exactly does that mean? Someone who's volunteering or someone who's getting paid? Someone, let's say, take an example. We have a soldier who's volunteering. Okay? He's in the Kitat Koinu, he's walking around, he doesn't get paid for it. That you can say, okay, that makes sense. He is doing now a mitzvah, but someone who's getting paid for his job, what's his main focus? His job or the job and getting paid, or the fact that he's now helping others? How do we describe him? So it's a question. The Mishnah Berurah here brings here if he gets paid, and everyone knows the main reason he's doing it is because he wants to get paid. If he would win the lottery and get 10 million shekels, would it continue or not?
No.
So if he wouldn't continue, obviously, why is he doing this job? To get paid. It's more of a personal thing. Sorry. If we continue, he's doing it for the population, for the community. But if you say, okay, I got 10 million shekels, I can now sit down in bed, rest, have a beer, and do whatever.
He could have been doing another job, but the doctor chose that.
It could be another job. Yeah? So it's a question: what's the main thing? And the Mishnah Berurah tends to conclude that if his intention is for both, also for his benefit and also for the community, so that's called a mitzvah. Do we really stop today? Do we really say, okay, I'm doing a mitzvah and I don't stop? It's a question. Many times it doesn't really interfere. One can say Kriyat Shema, we go have the routine of today. Usually most places of work start at 7, at 8 or 9. There's a time when you start, when you end. There's a number of hours, usually a person works a week. So there's no problem in davening, usually. Not like the olden days, people work from the morning to the evening and then that's it. But sometimes people do work from whenever they're awake, they're busy, and then they'll be considered oskim b'mitzvah. And even if a person doesn't, if he says Kriyat Shema, I think it's something which we can all learn. Because I'm sure all of us here and there put effort in helping the community. Volunteering in here, cleaning up here, helping other people, helping people who made Aliyah, helping people who are Israeli. We are all of us are somehow engaged in helping people around us. So obviously we'll say Kriyat Shema, we have set times today, and nothing will happen if we stop a few moments. In any case, we'll stop for having a coffee or riding the bike or whatever, right? In any case, we'll stop for that. So we should also stop for davening and for saying Kriyat Shema. But you can see from that how important is the thing that we do. It's called a mitzvah. We don't always pay attention to it and say, I'm volunteering. We are doing a mitzvah when we volunteer. So that's something we should remember. So whenever we do something for the community, that's called volunteering, and that's called a mitzvah. And it's just important.
We're partner from other mitzvot.
So at that time, when you do it, you're partner from other mitzvot if you can't do them together at the same time. Now comes the part which connects a bit to Purim. I want to read from Shulchan Aruch since there's an argument. We have things which are mitzvah midoraita and things which are mitzvah midarabanan, right? For example, in Kriyat Shema, the first pasuk is midoraita. Maybe a bit more, but for sure the first pasuk, we have an obligation from the Torah to say it morning and evening. Okay, the first pasuk. For men. Okay, as we mentioned, that's an obligation for men. It's a time-bound mitzvah. What happens if I eat before Kriyat Shema? Do I have to stop and say Kriyat Shema? Or can I finish eating and then say Kriyat Shema? Morning, evening. And why is it relevant for Purim? Purim this year is on Friday, right? Purim this year is on Friday. And we have a question. What do we do with the meal of Purim? Do we eat the meal in the morning? Which I'll say to you now, that's the best thing to do. To eat the meal around the morning, 9, 10, 11, that's the best thing to do. If you have a question about Purim, that's the best thing to do, to eat the Purim Suda during the morning. But some people don't want to eat the Purim Suda in the morning. They say it's Friday, it's a headache, you want to give Mishloach Manot. So there's another thing we can do. We shouldn't eat a Seudah meal too close to Shabbat, because then we come to Shabbat and we can't eat anything. We aren't hungry anymore. But if you start the meal very close to Shabbat, or relatively close to Shabbat, and you continue the meal into Shabbat, so you have one meal, there's no problem here of starting a meal before Shabbat. What do you have a problem? Can we eat before saying Kriyat Shema in the nighttime? And what happens about davening and or saying Kriyat Shema? Okay, let's say we started eating, what happens? So we have 4 options. Okay, 4 options of two criteria which together make more or less 4 options. The first criteria is the mitzvah rabbinical or deoraita. Is it midirabanan or deoraita? If the mitzvah is midoraita, we say 1 second. First do the mitzvah. If it's deoraita, Kriyat Shema, davening, Kriyat Shema and davening. If the mitzvah is rabbinical, we can say maybe there's more of a place to wait, and wait after doing the mitzvah, finish eating. That's the first criteria. The second criteria is, when did we start eating? When did we start eating? Did we start eating in a permitted time, or did we start eating in a forbidden time? What do I mean by permitted or forbidden? Chazal said half an hour before davening, don't start eating. Half an hour before davening. Okay? Let's say the time of davening starts at 6. So I can't start eating or can't start eating before 5:30. Right? So half an hour before the mitzvah, I shouldn't eat. Okay, so that's my fault. Fine. Half an hour before the mitzvah, I shouldn't eat. So let's say the time of Kriyat Shema starts at 6. From 5:30 and on, I shouldn't eat until I say Kriyat Shema. And now let's blend both of the questions together. If a person started eating, he already started eating, do we say he started eating, now stop? Or we say, okay, you shouldn't have eaten, but since you started eating already, so you can continue eating. Okay. So we have for that, I think, 3 options. We'll count them. The first option is, and then we obviously say, stop eating right now. He looks at the watch and says, whoops, it's almost the end of the time. Okay, now let's say the end of the time of davening, it's 9 o'clock. He looks at the watch, 10 to 9. It'll take him another 20 minutes to finish. If he finishes his meal, what will happen? The time of davening will pass. So if it's almost the time of the mitzvah is over, stop eating and do the mitzvah. Right? Stop eating, do the mitzvah. So if a person
Maybe you shouldn't have
started eating, he's
started.
in a meal, and then all of a sudden he realizes, 1 second, the time of shachrit is going to pass, stop eating and do the mitzvah of shachrit. So that's the easier answer, easier case.
You say I shouldn't have a cup of coffee before I come to shul.
A cup of coffee isn't eating. Eating is a meal. Okay, eating is a meal. And some say you shouldn't drink, but many times for many of us, a cup of coffee will help us daven. For many of us, we will come to davening without a cup of coffee, and we where's my coffee, right? Where's my coffee? I have a chavruta with someone, and last week he wasn't concentrated. He said, look, I'm not concentrated. I'm before the coffee. He wasn't in his house before the coffee, and you could really tell the coffee sometimes help. So for that, many are make help. When we say about a meal, we say about washing your hands and having a meal. So if we, up to now, to summarize up to now, half an hour before the time begins, you shouldn't start a meal. You should start a meal beforehand. Okay, if you started already the meal, if the time of the mitzvah is almost over, obviously stop the meal. What happens if he started the meal? We started the meal, and he still has time. He still has time. And here we differentiate between the Oraita and the Rabbanan. And when did he start? It's a bit hard to remember it. If you forget it, so it's fine. Just remember to go to Siman Ayin in the Mishnah Brura and to find out the answer. Okay? So even if you forget, at least we learned it and we know. I think I said a few times, one of the goals of learning together is even if we forget, we know that we learned about it and we know what to look for. Okay, so even if we forget all the details. So if it's a mitzvah midoraita, okay, like Kriyat Shema, at least the first pasuk is midoraita, right? Saying Kriyat Shema is midoraita. If he started with permission, he can continue. If he started without permission, he can't continue. Let's give it into numbers. Let's say that the time to say Kriyat Shema starts at 6. Okay, he started at 5 o'clock. Enough time before Kriyat Shema. We said half an hour beforehand you shouldn't start, but an hour beforehand you can start, right? So if you started an hour beforehand, that's fine. You can continue with your meal. If you started 10 minutes before the time of Kriyat Shema or after the time of Kriyat Shema, since Kriyat Shema is midoraita, it's from the Torah, he should stop the meal. Okay, so it's a few details. I know, it's fine. So if it's a mitzvah midoraita, it depends. If he started with permission, so he can continue eating. If he started without permission, which means he was already obligated to say Kriyat Shema and not to start a meal, or not to start a meal, so he needs to stop the meal. That's a mitzvah midoraita. But if it's a mitzvah midrabanan, a rabbinical mitzvah, so there he can continue eating as long as he knows that he'll have still enough time to do the mitzvah. Okay, so that's now how is it connected to Purim? So Purim we have, let's say, I'm not sure about the time. So let's say Shkia, let's say, what is it? No? Wait, where's the key? Okay. Yeah. That's front door, yeah. Okay, so we'll conclude before we start. Mariv, some people are a bit more lenient with eating, but we won't go, as I said, we aren't going to all the details about it. If we go to Purim, let's say the time to start Kriyat Shema on Purim is 6 o'clock. One wants to start a meal before Purim, just before evening. He should start the meal at least at 5:30, if that's the times, right? If the time of saying Kriyat Shema Knesset Shabbat is 6 o'clock, at least half an hour beforehand, he should start the meal of Purim. And that's how we connected between the two topics. And as I said, there's quite a few details here. We didn't go into all the details. Most chances we'll forget the details. The main thing we went to is we know that there's something to look at in Siman Ayin.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi.